Welcome back to Project 82, the SCP Remote Access Database. Which case file do you require?
Item number SCP-353. Object Class Keter. Biological Hazard Protocol is to be maintained at all times. Biohazard Threat Level 4. Full hazardous material suits, gloves, and oxygen supply will be required to examine subject. A disinfectant shower and decontamination spray are standard procedure before and after contact with SCP-353. The hold containment unit is to be kept underground at negative pressure and hermetically sealed at all times to prevent accidental contamination to the outside area. In the case of containment breach, all affected personnel are to be placed in immediate Biohazard Level 4 quarantine. Termination will be required in the possibility of an outbreak of one or more Class 9 infectious agents. Subject should be fed 3 times a day as standard and provided with the minimum required comfort items: a twin-size bed, a pillow, and a blanket. Clothing in the form of disposable surgical scrubs are to be provided as needed, but requests for items should otherwise be denied. Any outward signs of disease in the subject, such as rashes, boils, vomiting, or sickly pallor or demeanor, should be reported with haste, since the appearance of symptoms in SCP-353 means a willful effort on her part. Subject is to be subdued and questioned. Should SCP-353 need to leave its containment facility for any reason, it is to be fitted with an explosive collar, time-release drug delivery service for dosages of euphoric substances, and biohazard containment suit. Should SCP-353's suit breach containment, emergency sterilization procedures up to and including incineration of the affected area are to be carried out. SCP-353 appears to be a normal human female, 26 years old, of average physical capacity and average intelligence. Subject has the capacity to siphon infectious, viral, and bacterial agents from her environment, nurture and store them within her body, and then redistribute them to devastating pandemic effect. SCP-353's mood directly affects the radius of infections recorded, with increased emotional states leading to massively increased potency. SCP-353 seems to be immune from the symptoms of said infectious agents, but just as long as she is only passively storing them. Her active, willful attempts to nurture, manipulate, and change infectious agents while they remain in her body cause her to manifest symptoms ranging from mildly annoying to severe. Symptoms only last as long as she's actively inducing a change in the quantity or quality of an infectious agent, and thus rarely last longer than a few hours. Examinations have shown that the subject is able to store almost any infectious bacterial or viral agents within her body, though she is only capable of changing agents that are able to naturally survive within the human body. As of the writing of this report, SCP-353's blood contains traces of over 1,000 different infectious agents, including human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, Ebola, Marburg, 67 different strains of the common cold, herpes simplex A, E. coli, cholera, bubonic plague, SARS, and malaria. At least 30% of said infectious agents were previously unknown to the medical community and were possibly engineered by SCP-353 herself, making SCP-353 an invaluable resource. Addendum 353-01. SCP-353 was originally encountered in South Africa, where she seemed to be deliberately seeking to pick up strains of the Ebola virus. Foundation personnel pursued SCP-353 to Dresden, Germany, where they had determined that she had successfully contracted Marburg and redistributed said virus to. Subject was eventually subdued by physical means and taken into Foundation custody with minimal loss of life. To date, her true identity is unknown, as she gives no name other than Vector and refuses to answer any questions about her past. SCP-353 claims to have traveled the Western world seeking greater infections for her collection. When asked why, she would not give a response aside from, "Because I can." Addendum 353-02. Initial testing has shown that she is adept at manipulating and changing infectious agents in the bodies of nearby subjects as she is at manipulating them within her own body. She seems to prefer to manipulate diseases within her own body, however, as it grants her full access to the results of her manipulations. Furthermore, her ability to manipulate disease in nearby subjects means it's likely that she is equally capable of curing diseases and dispensing them. On a different note, personnel are reminded to refer to humanoid SCPs by their numerical SCP designation. Should SCP-353 refuse to cooperate, she is to be subdued and punished. We're not here to make her X-Men villain fantasies come true. Dr. Sari Arvi. Addendum 353-03. Given that this girl is a walking time bomb of viruses, I recommend we trank her, strap her to a table, and give her a massive dose of a ribavirin interferon cocktail to flush her system. Dr. Addendum 353-04. Flush her system? Hell no. Did you know that this girl somehow has the original strain of the 1918 Spanish flu? As well as a half a dozen strains of viruses we've never seen. The research possibilities alone. Dr. Addendum 353-05. Limited research approved. 05. Addendum 353-06. The embrace of this vector persona, including the fixation on the color black for cosmetic purposes, her might makes right attitude, her desire to infect rather than cure, and her disregard for human life all signal towards extreme malignant narcissism and psychopathic tendencies. Her obvious pleasure in manipulating and controlling diseases within herself despite the often painful symptoms involved are also quite troubling. Requesting approval for psychological examination. Counseling or therapy may be useful in reducing her difficult demeanor. Dr. Glass.
Case file ends. Which case file do you require?
Item number SCP-357. Object Class Euclid. A 10 kg seed sample of SCP-357 is to be contained within a hermetically sealed container within a 3 m by 3 m by 3 m room at Site 19. Samples removed from the container are not to exceed 1 kg. A detailed log must be kept of all SCP-357 that is produced, complete with accurate records of what had been used to feed it, and how much of the sample was subsequently destroyed via compression. The mass of the container is to be monitored electronically. Changes in mass that are not accounted for by removal or return of samples will result in an automatic lockdown of that section of Site 19, as this indicates that a breach of the container may have occurred. Unless provided Level 4 approval, researchers are not to expose SCP-357 to temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Celsius. Unless provided Level 4 approval, researchers are not to expose SCP-357 to temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Celsius. The amount exposed to these temperatures is never to be greater than 1 mm³ under any circumstances. SCP-357 is a malleable substance with a density of 250 kg per meter cubed. The material has been found to reflect all radiation with 100% efficiency. To date, chemical analysis of SCP-357 has yielded no conclusive results. Electron microscopy of SCP-357 has shown no inherent granularity at any level. These two latter results suggest that SCP-357 may not be atomic in nature. However, there have been no satisfactory hypotheses as to how baryonic matter is able to interact with it. When permitted to physically interact with SCP-357, researchers describe it as having a consistency similar to that of Play-Doh brand modeling compound. However, unlike Play-Doh, SCP-357 will not retain its shape for any length of time if left at rest. It will settle at a rate of approximately 0.5 cm per minute until it reproduces the shape of the inside of its container. SCP-357 will form a meniscus inside the container 7.5 cm high. The thickness of the substance at the top of the meniscus is 1 mm, at which point it merges with the surface of the container following a Gaussian curve. If allowed to settle on a flat surface, SCP-357 will spread until its average thickness is no more than 1 mm. The edge of the mass follows the same Gaussian function that is seen in the meniscus. If solid matter is placed in a container of SCP-357, it will sink into the substance at a constant rate of 0.5 cm per minute. SCP-357 will displace the appropriate volume as any other fluid would. If the solid object is fully absorbed by SCP-357, it will become impossible to distinguish between it and the substance of SCP-357. Theories range from the object taking on the properties of SCP-357 to the object being replaced by a corresponding volume of SCP-357. If a homogeneous pressure of at least 100 newtons per centimeter squared is applied to a sample of SCP-357, the material will decrease in size at a rate of 1.3 centimeters cubed per minute or more, depending on the magnitude of the pressure. When compressed in this manner, the density of SCP-357 does not change. Rather, the mass decreases at the same rate as the volume. Where the excess mass goes is presently unknown. If compressed to approximately 1 mm cubed at room temperature, no amount of force is able to decrease the size any further. Application of vacuum pressure does not increase the size of a sample of SCP-357. The only method found for increasing its mass is via the encapsulation of a volume. Addendum 357-1 SCP-357 was initially produced by Cyclotron in 19 at The responsible researchers at the university were given a Class B amnestic with the exception of Dr. who has been granted Level 2 clearance and allowed to do further research on SCP-357. To date, the results of the initial experiment that produced SCP-357 cannot be reproduced. As a precaution, particle physics laboratories and particle colliders are periodically monitored for similar discoveries. Addendum 357-2 SCP-357 is pending review for use in disposal of hazardous objects being held by the Foundation. Until the properties of SCP-357 are more concretely understood, particularly in high-energy environments, approval is being withheld. It is already clear that SCP-357 should not be exposed to some objects due to risk of unlimited expansion of the material. 05. Addendum 357-3 Some personnel have been caught smoking indoors and exhaling into SCP-357 in an attempt to hide the evidence. This is heavily discouraged due to security considerations, health issues, and risk of accidental ingestion. File photos of experiments 357-3 and 357-4 are freely available to those who continue to practice this abuse of Foundation property. Experiment Log 357-1 Date Subject 1. Ping pong ball. Procedure SCP-357 is allowed to fully absorb the ball while in a container sitting upon an electronic scale. Details: the ball is seen to sink into the sample of SCP-357. When the rest of the ball disappears from view, the scale reports an increase in mass of 5.6 grams, equivalent to the difference between the ping pong ball's mass and the equivalent volume of SCP-357. Experiment Log 357-2 Date Subject: a mass of SCP-357. Procedure: a sample of SCP-357 is molded into a box and placed upon an electronic scale. Before being allowed to set, the lid of the box, also molded from SCP-357, is placed on it. Details: a mass increase is detected exceeding the mass of the lid. Bisection of the box shows that it is now a solid mass of SCP-357. Experiment Log 357-3 Date Subject: 1 healthy Rattus norvegicus. Procedure: a 5 mm cubed sample of SCP-357 is placed inside the rat's food. The rat is to be monitored for 24 hours after ingestion or until death, at which point it is to be dissected. Details: 1 hour after ingestion, SCP-357 is observed to be eliminated from the rat's digestive system. Soon after, the subject exhibits a pain response. The pain is observed to increase over time. Though the mass of the animal does not change, an increasing amount of SCP-357 is eliminated from its body, concluding with a continuous stream after 3 hours. Death occurs within minutes of this event. Dissection reveals that the entire digestive tract has been converted into SCP-357, along with a number of surrounding organs. Death is believed to have been caused by blood loss. Experiment Log 357-4. Date: Subject: 1 healthy Rattus norvegicus. Procedure: Procedure is identical to Experiment 357-3. The subject is provided an intravenous supply of blood to prevent premature death. Details: Observations up to the 3-hour mark match those of Experiments 357-3. The stream of SCP-357 extruded from the rat continues at a steady rate. After 30 more minutes, the subject becomes increasingly lethargic. 15 minutes later, death occurs. Dissection shows that much more of the rat's viscera had been replaced with SCP-357, along with a significant portion of its muscle mass. Cause of death is determined to be due to conversion of part of the cardiac muscle into SCP-357. Experiment Log 357-5. Date: Subject: SCP-357 in cryogenic conditions. Procedure: SCP-357 is placed into a liquid helium environment and mechanically compressed. Details: A pressure of 100 newtons per centimeter squared is applied to SCP-357. The sample is able to be compressed to only 0.01 millimeters cubed. While still compressed, the sample is allowed to return to room temperature. When pressure is removed, the sample immediately returns to a volume of 1 millimeter cubed. Experiment Log 357-6. Date: Subject: SCP-357 in high temperature conditions. Procedure: SCP-357 is compressed to 1 millimeter cubed while at room temperature. The mechanism is then placed in a 1000 degrees Celsius environment and then releases the sample. Details: At a temperature of 750 degrees Celsius inside the compression mechanism, SCP-357 expands with sufficient force to damage it. 40 meters cubed of SCP-357 is produced within 10 seconds, fully engulfing the furnace, $50,000 worth of equipment, and 2 researchers. After 1 hour, the volume of the sample decreases to the equivalent of the absorbed matter. Object class is changed from Safe to Euclid. No further high-energy experiments are permitted unless it can be definitively shown that a repeat of the incident will not occur. Experiment Log 357-7. Date: Subject: SCP-357. Procedure: A 1 mm cubed sample of SCP-357 is placed in a 40 cubic meter container. The ambient temperature is steadily increased in order to determine the material's rate of expansion from application of thermal energy. Details: The experiment is still pending Level 4 approval. Models of expansion and further information regarding safety procedures are needed from Dr. before a decision can be made.
Thank you for your participation in Project 82, transmitting psioanalytic data to Dr.